You don't need to clap.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Hey, we got a name now. Sir Jaeger.
Jaeger.
He named the podcast. He came up with a great idea to call it the Cold Start on IgnitionTube. So moving forward, this will be referred to as the Cold Start, which is very exciting because now we actually have a name.
Yep.
We have something to start the podcast with.
Yep.
We can say, welcome back to the Cold Start.
Yep.
So without further ado, welcome back to the Cold Start. I'm Eli.
I'm Alex.
And today we're going to be talking about mods that are the best bang, or that provide the best bang for your buck. But before that, Alex and I were talking a little bit outside while brainstorming for this podcast, and there has been a car on your mind this week, which I think a lot of us can relate to. I have some things that cross my mind every now and again. What's a car that's been on your mind this week, Alex?
Yeah, so, just being who I am, always thinking about what's another bad decision after another. As you guys know from the first episode, I used to own a 335i E92. And the car that's been on my mind this week has kind of been the big brother to that, which is the E90, so the four-door BMW M3.
Why?
Why? Have you seen one? They just look amazing. They sound amazing. There's a reason, that car wears a real M badge.
Okay.
Not an M Sport, nothing like that. That has pedigree. That car has been proven, and I just think, look at it, sounds great.
Now, are you drawn to cars that have stereotyped owners? Because I know in the first episode you talked about C6 Z06s,
Yep.
and now we're talking about E90, E92 M3s.
Yep.
There is a stereotype that drives that car. Top Gear did a great version of it. Back in the day, before Bluetooth audio was a thing, they'd have the little Bluetooth headset in their ear, and they'd be in the left lane. They'd be up your bum. They'd have either no blinker on or the wrong blinker on.
Yep.
Is that something that you just are drawn to? Do you like being a stereotype?
I like the haters. That's my thing. I like the haters. I love the hate. I embrace it. And whatever I can do to ruin someone's day, I will.
Okay, but seriously, what is it about the E90 specifically that has you thinking this sleek? Like, are you thinking trade in the Focus, trade in the Mercedes, and go straight to the E90?
Yeah, that's something that crossed my mind. Good friend of ours, Tedward, Tom.
Hi, Tom. We're going to have you on the podcast soon.
Very soon.
Anyway, sorry.
But yeah, Tom, he's put over 40,000 miles on his M3 with, little to nothing going wrong. I mean, you can check out his channel for that kind of stuff. I think he had to do throttle actuators and a few maintenance things, but that car's been solid. That car gets tracked. It gets driven through the winter traffic.
Would you buy a manual or is it DCT?
Yeah, DCT.
Would you buy a manual or DCT?
I'd be open. I would kind of do either. Whatever, really was the best deal. I can see the way that I see that car is if I bought that car now and held on to it for 3, 4, 5 years, obviously I would lose money on it, but it would still carry some sort of premium, I feel, being the first and only V8 M3.
Fair.
It
doesn't sound like a wet fart like the new ones do.
Yep. And I just think that car in a manual would probably hold its value a little more. They're definitely a little harder to come by.
Especially clean ones.
Clean ones, yes.
Because there are a lot of business people that owned that car when it first came out, and touch car washes, highway miles with no clear bra or anything, and I'm sure they were washed with sandpaper.
Yep.
So finding a clean E90, especially E90, because the E92s definitely were more enthusiast owned.
Yeah.
An E90 may just be like a business guy who said, I want a top of the line BMW, and walked in a dealership and said, hey, that's mine.
Exactly. So, there's obviously different cases of each one. I would go either way. Really, I'm more in it for the best deal. I can make a great case for the automatic, the DCT, because I drive into the city every day for work. And if it was my only car, then that would make a lot of sense. However, a manual, I'm partial to it. I've driven manual. Both my last car has been manual for the last 5 years at this point. So
I'm going to adjust my mic and it's going to make noise. Sorry, guys. There is something to be said for a manual car, because I've been driving automatic for the past 2 years after driving manual for the previous 4. And every time I get back in a manual car, I'm like, man, why don't I have one of these in my life? And now part of that is the car that I owned didn't have a manual option. The S4 did, but the DSG is better in the S4. If you've driven a manual S4, you know what I'm talking about, as long as you're not biased to manual. So every time I drive a manual car, I'm like, man, like these are so good. It's so nice to be able to heel toe downshift, like be fully in control of that clutch pedal, the throttle engagement, when you want to shift, that kind of stuff. There is something to be said for automatics in traffic, but I'm actually kind of in the same realm where I had a B6 S4 Avant dangled in front of my face a little bit ago, and some of you saw that on my Instagram story. Like, what are you doing? It happened to be that one of my friends had one traded into his dealership, and through a long story, I may have been able to get a hold of that car. Unfortunately, it fell through, but that's another thing in my mind, the manual V8.
Yep.
There's just something to be said for a naturally aspirated manual V8. So, like, great noises,
Rev to the moon.
great gearboxes in both cars.
Yep.
Especially the E90 gearbox.
Yeah,
People
it's a
talk
good,
really good about those manuals.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long throw, but I hear good things. They're solid. That's really what counts.
Manual cars. We should make a whole another episode about manual versus automatic.
Yeah.
And the benefits of both, because we could talk about that for forever.
Yeah, let us know if you'd like to hear about that.
We should bring in some friends for that one.
Yeah, I think we're going to need some backup here.
Okay. That's that's tabled for a future podcast then.
Mm-hmm.
And now the whole podcast that's watching on video knows I'm not wearing socks. That's a little embarrassing. Anyway, and now I said it so people listening on audio too, if they are, also know that. But anyway.
It's kind of gross for those who can't smell it.
Oh, boy. Wow, really going downhill here. Episode 3 is where it took a turn for the worse. So let's talk about bang for your buck mods. Now, you were the one who came up with this topic. What is the first thing that came to your mind when you thought bang for your buck mod?
Yeah, so for me, the biggest thing, especially, this is a lot more prevalent in a forced induction car, so turbo supercharger. However, there are plenty of NA applications that this works, naturally aspirated. I think an ECU tune or flash is the best way to go. I think it's really just, a lot of cars with the right supporting mods even, or just on a stock car will pick up, as much as between 50 and 100 horsepower on average, I would say. So
yeah, it depends on the car. Like my GTI probably made, I don't know, like 30 wheel horsepower with a downpipe and a tune. Probably would have been like 25 with just a tune.
Yeah.
The best bang for your buck mod as far as horsepower goes definitely is the ECU tune.
Yeah.
And it wakes a lot of cars up. Even in totally stock form, it's amazing what tuners can pull out of the headroom that like Audi or Volkswagen has left or Ford has left, but still keep it safe.
Yeah, and a lot of it too, it's not even necessarily down to power numbers. It can totally change the drivability of the car, whereas you might have a car that, maybe let's say a turbocharged 4-cylinder that spools up really quick and then dies off in the higher RPMs.
Yeah.
If, granted the car is applicable for this, you can sometimes move that power band, that torque curve, that power curve a little later on, get some just a little higher, a little more momentum. It really changes the way the car drives in general.
For example, on my car, on the 3.0 motor in general from Audi, the 3.0 supercharged motor, the supercharger has a bypass valve that bleeds off extra boost. And the first thing you do when you tune the car, obviously you play with timing and fueling and all that stuff, but you make it so the car doesn't bleed off all that extra boost and higher RPMs.
Yeah.
And suddenly, instead of kind of just pulling evenly to redline, the power is more linear, you feel more up top, the car has more pull, and that's without touching anything else.
Yeah.
You're making all this extra power, and really, I guess it depends on the tune that you go for.
Right.
There's some off-the-shelf tunes, there's some custom tunes, and you can really get into it and really end up spending a lot of money. E55 tunes if you really want to go crazy.
Yeah.
But for the most part, these tunes are $500-$600 to $1,000, and you're making the most horsepower per dollar out of any other mod you'll ever do to that car.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it totally depends on the car, the application, but, I think that's probably my number one thing. And those who saw the first episode there have known that's a trend that I like to go in. So,
well, it's smart because everything after that has diminishing returns as far as either you spend more money to make more power or you could spend less than the tune, but you don't make as much power that the tune did dollar per dollar.
That's usually the biggest difference in my opinion here.
And cars without tunes are we're really dark.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think
the
we lost
sun
the
went
sun,
away.
Yeah.
That's embarrassing. Well, hopefully I can edit this in post so that this looks brighter for everybody else.
Yeah.
But sorry if you're watching this on video. We're really dark.
Yeah.
Oops.
It's a little mysterious.
Anyway, bang for your buck mods. This one may not be a bang for your buck mod, but I think for like smiles per gallon kind of deal, doing an intake on forced induction cars, not as applicable to NA cars. It does make a little more noise, but on forced induction cars, intakes are just awesome. Like if you're able to suddenly hear a turbocharger or a supercharger that you couldn't hear before, and you spend what $200, $300 to $500 for that thing that you're going to experience every single drive.
Yep.
You may not be able to go full throttle and take advantage of your tune every drive. You probably can, but even in traffic, to hear a little like supercharger whine when you're inching up to the car in front, or I guess not inching up, catching up to traffic, or a little turbo blow off coming through that intake that you hadn't heard before, makes the car so much more entertaining to drive, puts a smile on your face, and makes you drive with the windows down a lot longer than you would. Like cold weather doesn't really matter, hot weather doesn't really matter. You just want to hear those noises. I think an intake is definitely a good bang for your buck mod as far as smiles go. If you're looking for pure horsepower, intake's not the way to go.
Usually not, depending on the vehicle. But you're usually not going to get so much out of just an intake there.
Speaking of things that are best bang for your buck mods, I think a lot of people go to like the flashier stuff, but there is something to be said for those mods, like a short shifter.
Yeah.
Where I guess this only applies to manual cars, but you're touching that portion of the car every time you interact with the car. It doesn't matter if you have 5 friends in the car or 4 friends in the car.
Oh, totally.
And you're just going out for the night and you're not driving crazy. Or if you're ripping back roads, like you're engaged with that shifter no matter what you're doing in the car. And so throwing a short shifter in there really is something that improves your experience. It makes you think a little bit more about, hey, like this is much more solid feel than some gearboxes that are just
it's like a slush box. Yeah, exactly. You just kind of hot dog down a hallway, for lack of a better reference.
Yikes. No, it's just turned PG-13. Anyway, my GTI, I did the short shifter in that, changed the whole car.
Oh, totally.
And I think it was like $80-$90. It wasn't very expensive. Some cars you can change the whole shifter assembly or whatever and really go nuts, like Powen has in his SI.
Yeah.
But even then, it makes the car so much more engaging, and it's really not that expensive.
Yeah, and usually depending again on the application, but usually not so bad to install either.
Very true. Very true.
So,
what else are you thinking for good bang for your buck mods?
So this is one that I think is overlooked a little bit.
Sure.
Something that, everyone's all focused on adding power, adding noise. Guess what? When you add power, you got to slow down.
I think that's very overlooked in many, many, many applications.
Many applications. And I think that if I had to choose, and this is also for performance, if you do any track driving or just are looking out for safety, brake pads. Like, what a difference that makes. Quick little story. I have, my Focus ST, and when I had stock brakes, bone stock car.
Yep.
I went ahead, I had to do the rotors, so I figured I would do the pads as well. I went with StopTech slotted rotors. Those were great. Help with the heat dissipation with the slotted. But the most gain that I got was from the pads. I believe I went with a Hawk HPS pad, and what a difference that made.
Yeah.
And I, not even in just the stopping power, which was hugely increased, but just the overall feel of the pedal was huge, because before it was all the braking was at the top of the pedal, and now with these pads it was linear. So the further I pushed, the further it would stop, and that was also accompanied with brake fluid RBF 600.
Yeah.
So that was a big help as well, but also not too bad to do, and hey, it's pretty safe.
That is a decent, if you're like learning to work on cars, brake pads are definitely a good thing to learn. Not the most difficult thing in the world. You just want to make sure you do have some sort of friend that knows what they're doing there, because brakes are the only thing that are stopping you.
Yeah.
But I think brake pads are something that's often overlooked. You hear people say, yeah, I want to do, big 6 pistons or big 8 pistons.
Yep.
I'm guilty of that too. But just swapping out brake pads to a more aggressive compound, a lot of the time gets done the job that those people were looking to upgrade to 6 or 8 piston brakes for. Now, granted, doesn't have the same look as a big old brake caliper back there.
Yeah.
But if ultimately we're talking bang for your buck,
this is a great way.
Brake pads similar, if not the same, to a big brake kit, unless you're really like changing rotor sizes, which again is expensive. But I think brake pads are definitely overlooked. Brake lines, stainless steel brake lines, which I have not done on a car, so I can't tell you what that feels like. But people say that they're a big deal,
Driven
and they
a few
don't
with
seem
it.
that inexpensive.
It's about the feel.
That expensive,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, usually a couple $100 at the most.
What else for bang for your buck mods? I'm trying to think of something good.
Well, I think we're overlooking a pretty big one here.
What do you think?
So you kind of start to get into this with the intake, but
Okay.
when you're talking about noises, I mean, sometimes just even a catback exhaust.
Okay.
For those who are, looking for a little more noise out of their cars, I think that it can be expensive. You can be spending a few $100, but for a lot of people, depending on the person you are, depending on the car you're driving, I think that's going to be a good mod that I would say a bang for your buck. Smiles.
Now, depending on the car, sometimes you can get away with what you did and what I did on my GTI, which is deleting either a muffler or a resonator and
Or
still
both.
having a good sound. Yeah, you did both. If you do that on like the 3.0, like my SQ5, sounds like garbage. It's super raspy. That's where upgrading and spending the money on the exhaust is
Right.
worth it. But there are some cars like the GTI with the resonator delete sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Muffler delete on a GTI, don't do that. It sounds like a tractor. Not in a good way.
Bad tractor.
But I guess exhaust is something I'm overlooking as far as bang for your buck, because that's, again, something that engages you every time you drive the car. You're going to hear that noise
Yep.
no matter if you're driving slowly in traffic or ripping down back roads.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that.
What about what are your thoughts on like a shift knob? You're starting to get into it with the short shifter.
Yeah.
I feel like having a shift knob on there, again, something you touch every day, that's a pretty cheap mod. Bang for your buck, well, you might not get that much performance unless you do a weighted knob or something like that. But I think it helps. Anything you touch every day is always
So do you think you get more benefit out of a short shifter or out of a shift knob?
definitely out of a short shifter. I think the ultimate combo would be a short shifter with a weighted knob.
Yeah, and the knob, but the knob's probably cheaper than the short shifter.
Oh, the knob is way cheaper than the short shifter usually.
Maybe
but-
not, actually. Now that I'm thinking, like the BFI stuff for the
Yeah, for
GTIs,
you-
that's
yeah.
expensive.
Yeah.
They even make DSG shift knobs, actually. Or like
Really?
like my shifter shift knobs, yeah.
Huh, that's
so
interesting.
you can, have a sick.
Every time you put it in drive, you need a weighted shift knob,
yeah,
right?
and when you pop it over to manual mode and you're banging an upshift, you really want to make sure
Yeah, you have that extra
you're,
weight.
you're feeling the absolute best weight there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a couple good bang for your buck mods for really any car that you have. I know we addressed a little more manual related stuff than automatic, but hopefully you're an enthusiast and hopefully you've at least driven a manual car and can understand what we're saying. I understand not everybody's in a manual car right now, myself included. Alex drove an automatic car here today.
Yes. Technically still own a manual.
Yes, you do own a manual, but short shifter, intake, tune definitely is like the biggest bang for your buck mod. Brake pads, another great one. Exhaust, if you're feeling bold, or if you want to just go to an exhaust shop and chop off like a resonator or something. And what am I missing? What else did we talk about?
intake.
The intake. Did I say intake?
Say
We'll
that
have to
again.
run it back. Well, intake again. Double intake. Maybe you have two intakes in your car.
Yeah.
Maybe let's say you have an E90 M3. You have two intakes, right?
Yeah. Well, no, but you definitely do if you have a G35, G37 Infinity there.
A great way to end it is my ignorance on BMWs, just because, I'd rather spend my time learning about Audis. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to another episode of The Cold Start. Mm-hmm. Do we say The Cold Start on IgnitionTube, or do we just say The Cold Start? I guess it's only on IgnitionTube. But
Yeah.
if we get on Spotify eventually,
I think we'll have to be the cold start on
The
Ignition
Cold
Tube.
Start on IgnitionTube.
Because you're still IgnitionTube.
The Cold Start on IgnitionTube on Spotify. Hopefully. If you can't tell, I'm trying to get us ready for a little Spotify transition so that you guys can listen to it there. I've had a couple people message me. We're not on Spotify yet, but if you're listening to this on Spotify, then obviously
We
are.
made it.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry about the lighting. It's getting dark and light and dark outside, so if you're watching this on video, I may have had to adjust this a couple times, but that's all right. As always, I'm Eli.
I'm Alex.
Thank you guys for listening. Go out there and spread some positivity, and we will catch you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye. Nicely done.